Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being the show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Gotham, the latest episode of Van Helsing, as well as the latest episode of Arrow. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Gotham, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Van Helsing and or this week's episode of Arrow. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Gotham. Another great episode with a lot of interesting things that went down this episode. First of all, we have a lot of reunions. We have Barbara, Tabitha, and Selena running into, well, they end up going to the Narrows where the fights are happening, and they end up meeting Butch because Penguin sent them there to get Riddler, Ed, and also run into Lee. So it's just like a reunion all around. Because the thing is, earlier in that episode, you had Butch Grundy remembering Tabitha's face because he took a blow to the head, and so it slightly jogged his memory a little bit. And then he proceeded to rip that dude's arm off and beat him with it. It seems like he did that multiple times throughout the episode, like ripping people's arms off. It's like I said, it just seems like this season's bloodier to me, but maybe that's just my imagination. It seems more brutal. But nevertheless, it's actually pretty interesting to see kind of things play out the way they did. Obviously, like Tabitha being forced to fight Grundy for the prize of Ed, so you can definitely tell that Tabitha was really getting to Grundy eventually. Like at one point she hits him and he definitely starts remembering. At one point he kind of snaps back into Butch and it's like, Tabitha, and she hits him again accidentally, and like he knocks back out because the next time he wakes up he's fully Grundy. So either that blow, like that next blow kind of knocked Butch back deeper into his subconscious, or the fact is that just Grundy's like persona just takes over too much. So it's like that bit of Butch stayed awake is just overshadowed by Grundy. So it is kind of sad because for Tabitha, like, she thought Butch was going, and now I was like, oh, he's back and everything, which I did love the line from Barbara, like, oh yeah, well, you should apologize, because you electrocuted me because, for, killing him, but look, he's alive, he's fine. Not per se, but still. I mean, he ultimately walked away not having Ed, mainly because of Lee's interference. Because there was a point where they were trying to take Ed, and Lee was like, no, don't let Ed go. It's like they were like, oh, you're trying to be, Barbara's like, oh, look at you, you haven't changed, you're being basically a goody two-shoes, you're just trying to do the right thing. It's like, I think more so than anything, Lee was thinking like, yeah, if you don't let go of Ed, Grundy's going to snap and rip you to pieces. I think that was more so the reason, which to be fair is kind of interesting too, considering the fact is that Lee's never cared too much for Barbara, the kidnappings and the whole or her being a psychopath situation. Lee has never really gotten her back necessarily. It's kind of interesting because Lee ended up like pistol whipping her in this episode. She's like, oh, that felt great. And it's like, I want to go for the other cheek. It's like, no, I'm good. Which is interesting because remember there was that time Barbara was that in Arkham? She was unconscious, and I think Barbara slapped her. Lee slapped Barbara while Barbara was unconscious. I'm curious, was that the other cheek? I'm just curious, like, did they plan that out or something? I don't remember. I just remember she slapped her. It's like, it would be kind of interesting if it was the other cheek she ended up slapping her. So it's like almost like a balance thing. It's like, I kind of already got you like a while back, so we're good. She did kind of take an interest in the fact is that Lee's back and everything. It's like, oh, does Jim know? It's like, Jim who? So still curious about all that. I think no matter what, I think Barbara will always have some weird fascination with Jim, especially not just Jim, but anyone connected to Jim. Because I don't know, I think there's still some part of her that like maybe remembers the good times or something like that. Because there's this moment in last season, I was wondering what they were going to do with Barbara because they had like her in his subconscious and making it seem like, to be fair, that was Jim's subconscious, but still they made that Barbara seem like, oh no, like she was apologetic. So yeah, like I said, that was in his head. Maybe on some level he hoped that him and Barbara could be better than what they were. Like maybe that Barbara could go back to being the Barbara that she was before now. So before all this, the Barbara she was back in season 1, which seems like ages ago when you think about it. It's like, it's hard to believe that's even the same woman. Like comparing that Barbara to this one, it's like night and day, interestingly enough. But that's neither here nor there. Firefly showed up. It's like, well, you didn't meet the deadline, so you're still going to die. So you're all going to die. if it wasn't for Lee's interference. That was really interesting. And then it turns out, what I thought was really interesting too, is the fact is that Cherry was going to sell Ed out anyway. It didn't matter whether or not Grundy won or not. Like, she was, because it's like, oh, Penguin wants him, so he's going to get him. Because the last thing she wants is like, this is her territory, but the last thing she wants is Penguin meddling with her whole affair. I mean, it's kind of interesting too how this all happened. Like, the reason why Penguin found out is because word spread about what Ed was doing, put on his little play act of like acting like the idiot, like acting like Oswald, mocking him. Which Lee kind of warned him about that, but Ed didn't bother really listening. So fortunately, this situation kind of went in as a kind of a lose-lose situation to a certain degree, because I mean, Penguin didn't win, and the girls didn't win either. But I mean, Tabitha knows that Butch was alive now, so I was waiting for that them to be reunited like that. So I'm definitely very interested to see like where that goes. I mean, this also means we're getting Grundy closer and closer to remembering who he was. I mean, because the cool thing too is when he said Tabitha's name, like representing Butch, his voice changed back. He wasn't talking like Grundy, he was talking like Butch. So the question is, what happens when he fully remembers? Will he be like Butch with Grundy powers, or what? What's going to happen to that? I'm sure, Ed's going to try to keep Grundy in the dark as much as he possibly can, because it's like, well, he has a muscle-bound idiot essentially, in his mind, even though, it's not like he's the sharpest tool in the shed himself, but, he probably wants to he definitely wants to keep Grundy in the dark about who he really is. And it's like, oh, Tabitha, oh, she's nobody. But like I said, it depends on like how much of his memory starts slowly coming back. We'll kind of have to see where that whole storyline goes. But it also interests me too because of Lee revealing Sherry to have the lady who runs the whole fight being the one that was going to sell them out, because that's the reason why Firefly got there, knew where they were, was because of that. And so, and then Barbara quickly dispatched of her, and I like the whole crowd being silent, and she's like, we used to work for Penguin, but now we don't, and everyone cheered, they're like, yeah. But now this whole situation has left Lee in charge of the whole operation now, because they look at her as a hero, because it's like, she healed them up, she helped with the children of the people in the Narrows, which is kind of interesting too, because it seems like the Narrows is going to play a bigger part this season. I don't know, like I feel like I don't really remember them really ever bringing up the Narrows name before, but maybe that's a neighborhood that like Selena hangs out in, and Ivy has too, which we have yet to cut back to Ivy too. Like last time we saw her, she took like some herbal medicines and stuff like that, and it seemed like it was about to change her, but we have not cut back to it yet. So, but I guess that's the neighborhoods they kind of grew up in and have been in throughout the series. I just feel like I don't really remember them ever outright being like, oh, the Narrows. But it's like now all of a sudden I'm hearing the Narrows all over the place. Maybe that's just because I'm an idiot. That's a strong possibility. But it seems like it's going to play a big part in this season. Just the fact this is coming up so much. I mean, parts of the story are taking place there too, so. Because it seemed like it might be taking like a societal aspect too, because it's like you have the Narrows being kind of like the place that kind of gets treated the roughest, especially like as we saw last episode, the cops coming in with Penguin's people, kind of roughing up people from the Narrows just to get information about Pig. So they're not really treated with respect, and I think that's just kind of like almost like a class system type of thing. But I'm curious to see what happens with Lee in charge. I mean, obviously Riddler's still going to be around too, because that's where he needs to be until he might be in a better position now that Lee's kind of in charge, so he might not have to worry about the whole raising money situation. Plus, it's helped Lee's whole endeavors with helping people. So whether she'll use this in a more positive sense or whether she'll kind of get obsessed with power, which I hope she doesn't. I hope it doesn't turn into one of those situations of she gets a little power crazy too. Because that's the problem. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we will just kind of wait and see on that front. But then the other side of things, we had multiple things going down this episode. For one, we have Penguin bonding with this kid. Because for him, like this whole situation with Ed has kind of got him bothered. Because basically Sophia's like, you need to essentially find a hobby. You can't just be a crime boss 24/7. You kind of drive yourself crazy with all the things, making sure everything runs smoothly, and when things kind of fall apart, you just shouldn't stress yourself out. But it seems like he bonds with this boy who's basically kind of like an outcast, which immediately in my brain his name is Martine, which makes me go, was that set up by Sophia or is that just something else? It just happened. I guess because when Oswald looks at him, he sees a lot of himself. I guess it's just the situation that Penguin himself can understand. He's always kind of been the run of the litter and kind of always pushed around by people until he eventually got to where he is. And I guess that's what is going to be what he's doing with Martine in a more of like a mentor situation. Though Martine's like, oh, I'm your friend, but Penguin, because of his whole situation with friends, has made him very paranoid. He's like, I made that mistake with Ed. I'm never making that mistake again. Even teaching him how to like turn his situation, kind of manipulate the bullies, ended up eventually turning them against each other, which is that was kind of interesting. But that whole situation, I think it put things in perspective for Penguin too. Like it made him realize never to let people get too close, but he's been letting Sophia get too close. And he's like, yeah, because you know what friendship does? It blinds you to what's right in front of your eyes, which means Penguin's not stupid. He's starting to see what Sophia is doing, which is kind of a bad thing for her. Because she tries to steer the pot a little bit by the whole like Gordon becoming captain thing, which obviously I'll get to soon enough. But it's not like she makes it seem like, oh, it's for the sake of Gotham. It's like, oh, you're better at the job. But it's like more so anything. It was a play to manipulate Penguin even more. But, I think Penguin's starting to see through her because it's like, oh, yeah, like, it's like she is trying to be my friend, isn't she? She says she is my friend. And it's like, you promise yourself you won't make that mistake again. So things might not go exactly to plan as Sophia might think they are. I mean, like I said, she's been very tactical and very good at how she's handled this so far, but I'm curious to see whether everything really continue because I think she's underestimating Penguin. She might be even overestimating herself. But it's like this old cat and mouse game she's playing right now. Maybe in her mind, she's like, well, Penguin's underestimating me, and I want it that way. I've made it so he does do that. So we'll ultimately see. Where that all goes, because obviously, like, before I kind of finish that all off, I'll go back to Gordon's situation this episode. That being the mayor is offering him, it's like, oh my god, you should become captain. Harvey Bullock, he's screwing up so much. And it's like, oh, he's working for Penguin. Oh, he's such a terrible guy. It's like, really? Even though you guys were super for it from the very beginning, you want to make all everything's falling to shit now, so they want to blame Harvey. It's like, oh, he's going to take the fall for everything, when in actuality, they're the ones that gave the go-ahead in the first place. And it's not like it's just Harvey was the only cop that was on the take with that whole Penguin situation. Everyone was. No one wanted to step up to Penguin with this whole, situation, It was kind of not worthwhile in their eyes, but not last week's episode kind of opened everyone's eyes to this whole new situation. So, but obviously Jim didn't want to do this because it would mean betraying not just only his partner, but his friend. But as we saw this episode, like Harvey is slipping further and further. There's this little interesting ceremony they have called the Bullet Hole Club that basically every cop, gets handed the bullet that they're shot with, kind of like a rite of passage in a weird way. Bullock was supposed to do it as captain, but he bailed because of that particular cop he shot who was kind of stuck with the pig mask last episode. He couldn't face it. He couldn't deal with the fact is that he made so many mistakes because prior to this, he's been doing a good job as captain, but he started on that slippery slope and he's just been falling ever since. And the fact is that he didn't show up is what finally cemented things in Jim's head because Sophia points out the fact is, if you really didn't want the job, if you weren't even thinking about it, you would have gotten rid of that paper immediately, but you've kept it with you the entire time. But for him, I think he was waiting for Bullock to prove himself, and he'd be like, okay, I don't know, what am I thinking? Like, no, Bullock's got this. But Bullock just kept spiraling. He's like, because him facing them would have meant him taking responsibility for what happened. Because him doing what he's doing now, just drinking in this office, passing the responsibility on to Jim, no matter what it was, whether the cops would hate him or not, at the very least, if he had done this, they would have respected him because they were like, okay, he's stepping up to his mistakes. He's embracing them. But in this case, he just ran away. Like I said, he was on that slippery slope ever since the whole season began with this whole situation. Like I said, it's super sad because, like I said, Bullock, it's something I brought up earlier. Like I always said, he started off very gray in the beginning, but obviously he's changed. Like he's become a very good cop. He's a very good guy, an honest dude. Just made a mistake and he just can't face up to it because, just too hard, I guess. And now on top of that, he feels like his best friend stabbed him in the back, which even Gordon admits, I stabbed him in the back. I stabbed my partner in the back, and he doesn't feel right about it, but he feels like it's the only way forward for the GCPD as well as Gotham. Like, that they need to come together, and like Harvey's not in any shape to really run things. But Harvey does bring up a good point of like, when it's all said and done, what price did you have to pay for this? Like, nothing in Gotham comes for free. So the fact of the matter is, you got this means you're going to have to pay something eventually down the road. And he's like, I hope when the time comes, you can pay for it. And that question becomes, what will be the price? That price, in my opinion, going to end up being Sophia. Because the fact of the matter is, he brought Sophia, not intentionally, but going to Carmine, set the whole thing in motion so that like Sophia would come here to kind of help with the whole Penguin situation, which she is. But when it's all said and done, when whatever happens, whatever plays out with the whole Penguin situation, when she ultimately does help out, what will happen then? She might take control over things. She might even be worse than Penguin. She might not run things as fair and square as her dad is. She constantly compares Penguin and be like, oh, well, this is how my dad would run things. My dad does this and that. Which, to be fair, that's probably more of a slap in the face to Penguin, just to be like, oh, you're kind of still inferior to my dad. You're still not up to the ranks of my dad. More so than that. But who's to say she would run Gotham the same way her dad would? For all we know, she might be a little bloodthirsty. So far, she's been very like tactical and not too like power hungry or whatever. But at the very least, it's like I said, still a situation we'd have to wait to see. I mean, even if that's not the end result, this, like I said, this whole situation with Penguin figuring her out, it might end with her dead, and that's another Falcone that's gone now because of Jim, and that might bring Carmine's like vengeance on him and stuff like that in all of Gotham. So there's another way to take that. Also, it seems like Jim isn't going to let like Sophia use him, because she's like, oh, are you going to come in or not? Which he's like, no, I'd rather stay out here where I can breathe, essentially, because it's like the games and manipulations that she's playing. She's saying like, oh, Bullock, what you did to him was a merciful death because he's weak. You're always helping pick him up, and it's like, it's a waste of time and effort. The fact of the matter is, you need to be the head of things. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is, that could be a manipulation too, because it's like, oh, I need you in a good position so that when I do take back this town, you wanted a gangster, here I am to run things. And when things are needed to be ran, I'm going to rely on you. Might kind of go back to how things were in the past, like especially when Jim first got to Gotham. Like, it's like Carmine kind of ran things, he kind of kept the peace and everything like that, but maybe, she kind of runs a similar situation to Penguin, not the whole crime thing necessarily, but kind of having a similar relationship. It's like, oh yeah, Jim, you're in this position, I got you there, so you owe me some favors, maybe something like that. So, but it seems like he's not biting into it, which, it already seemed like, okay, there was something there that was going to definitely mess Jim up in the future. But I mean, it seems like he's learning, not much like Penguin, they're both learning not necessarily to trust Sophia. So, like I said, she hasn't gone very bad with the way she's done things. She's been manipulative, sure, but in retrospect, like now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, she has been very cutthroat with her way of approaching things to a certain extent. Like, to the point that, no one's free in this game of hers. Like, everyone is a piece on the chessboard to her. So, ultimately, I'm very interested to see what goes down in that whole regard now that Jim is captain. Will there be any pulling Bullock back from this whole situation? What is going forward with Sophia and Penguin, as well as the whole Grundy situation with Ed, as well as the girls with their little ventures, especially now that like they're kind of in Penguin's bad graces now for a multitude of reasons, because they failed, and not only did they fail, they're also still alive too. So we'll see where that goes. Like I said, overall, another great episode. So I cannot wait to see what goes on in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Van Helsing, a fantastic episode with so much good stuff that went down in this episode. We're going to have to break everything bit by bit. Obviously, we have Vanessa and Julius meeting up with Doc and Axel. Wasn't expecting that to happen so soon. And I was almost halfway expecting when they met up with them, I was like, oh, it's everyone else. Is Muhammad, Lucky, and Flash like right around the corner. Turns out not to be the case. But obviously, like the big thing in this episode was the fact is that Vanessa is reluctant to bite Alex. I'm not calling Alex, Axel, mainly because it's like, well, the last time she bit someone and transformed him, it was Dylan, and Dylan died because of it. I mean, to be fair, like Dylan's whole situation, she was modified and messed with by that doctor, but still that trauma is still there, and she's reluctant to do it, especially for someone like Axel, because Axel looked after her for so long. He was her friend, person she trusted, as a good ally. So it's like she doesn't want to do the same thing to him. But Axel, he doesn't care as long, like either way, he'd rather die than kind of like keep going like this. So even if it kills him, it's better for him. So I mean, at the very least, in Dylan's case, it didn't kill her outright, but it made her, like, the sun be poisonous to her, so, I don't know. But a big part of this episode's effect is that they're tracking down the red door, and they end up crossing paths. In particular, it's interesting, too, because it ends up being like, oh, they have to go back to the farm, because it's like, oh, you were so close, you just didn't even realize it. And I love that. Like, it's kind of one of those things, like, it's kind of something someone brought up recently. It's like, oh, video games. Like, they like it when video games take you back to, like, the beginning. It's like grand circle. It's just like, I don't know. It's almost like symbolic because, like, everything comes full circle because now she comes back there. She's stronger and everything. I mean, in actuality, it means more the fact is that she came back. But we'll kind of dive into that soon enough. Because the weird thing about it is we end up meeting Scarlet, which interesting, like, I thought that was kind of interesting because, like, the last time we saw her in her, like, her outfit, I was like, huh, is that mysterious swords person a lady? Because, I mean, I didn't know, like, to me, I could have sworn I saw, like, the figure of a woman, but I wasn't 100% sure. Turns out I was right. But it was throwing me off. It's like, wait, you're seeing the dreams too? It's like, what the hell does that mean? Because so far, the people who felt this pull, who've seen the door, who've had this dream, are Julius and Doc, and I would assume Flash as well. It's because they were bitten by Vanessa and turned back, so there's some kind of connection there. But it seems like that's because it got weird because Dimitri also saw it. So I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Because he's seeing the red door as well. So I was like, okay, why is Scarlet seeing it? But then the twist being that they're sisters. I was like, what? That's so good. That's so cool. Because she started talking about the fact that her parents knew about the rising possibly coming and that they trained her for it, but she never really got an answer why. Ultimately, her dad ended up killing himself. I don't think she really talked about her mom at all, did she? And I guess that's why, because they had the same mom. Her name's Abby. Interesting enough, really quickly, I'll skip to it. The guy that she was talking to, like, that was in the lab, that's like, oh, let's, specimens and stuff like that. And Abby was like, no. And he's like, oh, Van Helsing's. That wouldn't be Dimitri, would it? Like, I mean, this would have to be like 20 or 30-ish years ago or something like that. I was like, could that be Dimitri just like with a different... I'm sure it's not, but immediately my brain thought that just because later on he's like, oh, welcome back home. It's good to be home again or something like that. So that's where my mind went with there, but it's most likely not the case. I mean, for him to know her mom like that makes me think he'd have to work with her. So, but he's supposed to be ancient. So I was like, how would he get around that? Like, I guess he just like disguised himself up, but... No, because whoever that was seemed like they might be younger than even Dimitri is, so maybe that's not the case. I don't know. I'm curious about that. Like, maybe that's someone we'll kind of get more familiar with soon enough, but that was just kind of interesting to me. I mean, to be fair, they were super young at the time, so of course they wouldn't remember everything, because slowly Vanessa's remembering, like, no, I've actually been here, and so did Scarlet. Because I was wondering about that. I wasn't expecting them to necessarily be blood related. I expected them to be connected to this whole thing. Because there's little, like, when a baby's born and they are taken away to kind of be checked and everything, and they're left, little things. I don't know what they're called, that they're left in, that you could see them, like, sleeping in a glass, like, from behind the glass, like that. Like, I was thinking, like, they were connected by that, because Vanessa and her go into the room, which the code to enter it was Van Helsing, of course. But then they look, and there's like a tube, and it's like, is that like, are they breeding vampires? It's like, no, that looks like a hybrid. So then that starts bringing up the question, like, as I thought, it's something I thought up before. It's like, I kept saying, like, no, it seems like Vanessa's case is she is a Van Helsing. Van Helsings are just this bloodline, this special. It seems like they might have some special ability, but it seems like they're like Vanessa in particular, maybe Scarlet, because we haven't really seen her in combat. So if she's a Van Helsing too, that might mean she can do what Vanessa can too as well. I mean, the situation just isn't called for it yet. I mean, we don't know, like, if she's ever been seriously injured before, if the same thing would apply. But the fact, which they had that sick-ass fight going at each other like that, too, which is, it's always so cool when you get like long extended fights. It's not just against like dumb enemies. It's like, no, this is like some skill fights, you know? So weapons involved in everything until Scarlet kind of threw up the grenade and was like, okay, so how do you want to play this out? Which is kind of interesting. I guess that kind of shows you she's kind of like the wild card in some cases, but I'm sure that was her just bluffing anyway. But nevertheless, I guess it also applies to why I'm sure everyone's like that. Like, no matter what the case may be, the whole Axel situation is just like, no, he's a vampire. Either turn him or kill him. So maybe that's the case. I feel like Scarlet would have noticed if she had like a rapid healing ability. But then again, Vanessa probably never, hers didn't kick in until she died. So it was like something inside of her manifest. And once again, getting back to what I was trying to say, I'm sorry, I'm going off on the tangent. But what immediately my brain is thinking is like, she was a Van Helsing, being able to turn vampires back into humans, having the skills, that's that. But her like ridiculous healing ability, plus her like rage, even when she was fighting Scarlet, she's kind of going like, kind of smiling and getting all like the more vampire side of her. I think that is something they experimented on. Granted, her mom didn't want anything to do with that, but it seems like the partner wanted to. So, but it's because maybe it's just Vanessa and Scarlet being Van Helsings and made them special. So it might be that only Vanessa was experimented on. Maybe Scarlet wasn't. So maybe Scarlet doesn't have the healing factor that Vanessa does. I don't know. Like, but it's so interesting because it's a blend of like supernatural and science fiction. So especially when like Doc's sister found out about it, it must have been like, whoa, our experiment is here. Like, whoa, something. Okay, like the fact is, like, that's the question, because like this is like a government thing. So the moment like she found out, like her sister Sarah found out about Vanessa, it was like, so did she realize? Well, I think the whole point was, no, we got to get our experiment. Oh, she's back. Like maybe she had been hidden away for so long, but now it's like, you know, because her mom did a good job of hiding her. It's like, whoa, oh, here she is. We got to go get her. Maybe that was the whole point. But then Rising happened. But then you hear like Scarlet talk about her parents knowing it was happening, but it's like, how did you know? Did Abby know, that it was happening? Because in particular, well, I mean, Abby's been gone, so we don't know. Like, I doubt she's dead. Because there was someone watching them on the camera, and did get a call. It's like, Vanessa, I can't believe you're still out. I'm thinking that might have been her mom. Maybe not. I feel like she would have known her own mom's voice, but to be fair, she was super young. She never really knew her mom, and those memories are only coming back. To be fair, once again, they were little kids, so it's like been like 20 plus years. So, you're a little kid at that point, so your memory is very fuzzy at that time. So that's so interesting. I mean, it kind of works out for like Vanessa too, considering the fact that she kind of lost her family. Now she's getting a family back to a certain extent, a sister she never knew exists. That's some interesting stuff, because now you not only have to deal with one Van Helsing, but you have to deal with two, which then immediately my brain goes, yeah, but that's also set up for like a depressing ass story where it's like both sisters end up on opposite sides. Maybe something that happened to Dylan might happen to Scarlet, and that puts her, because people grow up or siblings like that, and it just you just get the feeling like something bad's going to happen. But we'll just kind of have to wait and see. It does explain why she was getting the visions and stuff like that. Which still, once again, why the hell is anyone like Dimitri getting them? Is it connected to the vampire who, I figured as much, but it turns out is in fact an elder? She woke him up. Who, like, he got in her dreams and disguised himself as Susan. So showing you how powerful he is too, because he can infect her dreams. The dreams didn't go to anyone else but Vanessa. That has to be a little bittersweet, because like, oh, you're seeing Susan again, but it's just, no, it chose that form because it knew it'd be a form that she'd accept. It'd be less tension, less resistance. I don't know. I'm very interested to see where that all goes, especially at the end where like Dimitri shows up. We do see that Axel's gone, but man, I'm curious to see what they do with that whole situation, because Axel does seem like he knows a little bit more than he lets on, but even he, I'm sure, doesn't know the full story of everything. So, but this is also a great episode for Doc and Julius, or for when it was also Doc confronting Vanessa and being like, I'm sorry, you don't have to accept my apology, because this is her trying to make up for things. And like I said, I'm pulling back a little bit on Doc, because it's like, hey, you're trying your best, you're trying to make up for what you did in the past, and it's okay. I mean, it's not okay. I mean, Axel still got turned into a vampire, you kind of left them to die, but still, it's like you're trying to make up for it, and I can't fault you for that. You know you made a mistake, and you're making up for it. So I've grown a little softer on her, especially this episode, because you see her and Julius bonding, which I do love. The fact is he made those like knuckle gloves, and he'd be like, well, I'm a boxer, so. But then like the back and forth of her being like pessimistic, he's like, are you always this optimistic and stuff like that? And he's just kind of like the beaming ray of sunshine of like, oh, we're going to get some fuel. She's like, well, if we don't find him, oh, we'll be okay. We'll find Wanda too, which would be like, oh, that'd be sick. Because they kind of did just abandon Wanda after the whole farm situation, didn't they? Well, because they had to leave it out in the front. So while they were kind of running away, because they had to trying to find a way out of that facility at that time. So, but just them bonding and everything, and then her falling into that trap, which luckily didn't end badly like it could have. And that was a moment where I was like, okay, they're gonna run into like the feeders or whatever going to come to. And it's like no. Like Muhammad, Lucky, and Phil will show up in time. And that's what I was thinking. Not that case, but I'm sure it's like right around the corner. Oh, it's so good. But like them bonding and laughing because he's like, oh, I guess the reason why you're acting so cold is because you're used to dead people, so you don't know how to really deal with and talk to living people. And she makes fun of him because he's afraid of needles and everything. He's like, it's not funny. And he's like, okay, go ahead, do it. He's like, okay, you can go ahead and do it now. Just stop waiting. And she's like, I already did it. It's already done. He's like, oh, okay. And just like them bonding, which I'm like, is that gonna turn into something? That's kind of cute. Well, I don't know. I mean, you've seen Doc's situation, so it's kind of like maybe Julius isn't her type, but nevertheless, it is nice that they're bonding. It's also kind of interesting. I figured as much with the way last week's episode ended. We're just going to leave the old Johnsons behind, but I'm sure we're not done with them. I'm sure that's still a thing, because let's not forget Sam is still out there, so. But then there's also the other side of things with the whole elder situation with Dimitri, because the fact of the matter is he's actually scared of the elder because it's like, oh, well, Vanessa could actually use it against us. And it's just because it's like, oh, Vanessa changed her destiny. So I'm like, what does that mean exactly? Was she always meant to, like, maybe she was always meant to be something for the vampires, to be their future, but now she can, like, her destiny shifted so that she could just as easily be their destruction, I guess, especially because if she shifts and gets an elder on their side, because she actually woke one up, which is like, how did you do that? Is that just a Van Helsing thing? Like, what that's all about, and why the thing has such an obsession with her. But it also seems like Scarlet also had it too, so it is seem like it is definitely a Van Helsing thing in particular, but for what purpose, I don't know. I mean, what really was the government up to with their experiments? Like, what were they trying to do? Were they just trying to create weapons? Did they always know that vampires were eventually going to come? I mean, because she is a Van Helsing, so have Van Helsing's always been like a government secret too, or something like that? Like I said, it's like they're taking something that's very fantasy and supernatural and also mixing a bit of sci-fi in it to a certain degree. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. But getting back to it, it's like Dimitri plans on trying to get to the Elder first so that he can use him as a weapon, but it's like, because we did hear last season from Dimitri that, oh, the elders are still alive. So the question is, like, what happened to them? Why are they in their states? Because we did, I think they said, like, I think this show brought it up, like, that vampires can die, even of old age, that eventually they will rot away. So is this particular elder, the only one that's left? Or are there others still sleeping? Where do they stand in the grand scale of things? Do they want vampires to rule the world? Do they even like vampires? Are they like, no, we're older than you and we're kind of disgusted by you? Because there's typically that type of thing in vampire fictions where you have, like, the really old ones that are just like, I'm so disgusted what you've, like, monsters have become, you're perverse, you're disgusting. I don't know. Maybe this whole situation, even the Rising, was some like grand destiny thing that was set in motion a long time ago. Maybe it's not just a freak accident that ash flew into the sky and covered it up. I mean, because the whole thing is that slowly but surely the sun is poking out. Because last season they've been operating to make it so that the ash kind of fills the air more and more to kind of blot out the sun. But even in this episode, you saw Doc and Julius kind of bathing in it, which kind of proves the fact of the matter is that there's still hope for Vanessa healing Axel, that her bite doesn't really completely mess with people. I mean, maybe eventually she'll get to the point it's like, oh wait, you're Van Helsing too, so maybe she'll leave it to Scarlet to do it, so that she doesn't have to worry about doing it herself. Maybe she thinks there's something wrong with her rather than there's something wrong with just like I said, I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter no matter what the situation. Even if Doc and Julius are out in the sun, it still doesn't change the fact is that what she did to Dylan, even though it was accident, even though it was her trying her best, her daughter died in her arms. I still feel like there's more to that, more than that gut punch. But we're just gonna have to wait and see. Like, there might not be anything else to that. So. But we also got introduced to another group known as the Sisterhood, who Dimitri had a falling out with. Because even they're like, oh yeah, like, there's always been a war between us and your kind. Which is like, so are they not vampires? Or are they like a different breed of vampires? It's hard to tell. They don't necessarily look like vampires. They have like some kind of almost like makeup on their face, whether it's like war paint or something like that. But who they are and for what purpose, I don't know. Because there's one in particular that that vampire sent by Dimitri was supposed to ask. Also, that whole Dimitri squishing that dude's head thing. Like I said, I feel like this season's even, I don't know, brutal, But maybe that's just me. But I'm curious to learn more about this whole situation. Like I said, there's just like so much good revealed and stuff went down this episode. I'm interested to find out more about Scarlet, this whole Van Helsing situation, what these experiments were about at the farm, what Dimitri has in store, about this elder, about this sisterhood. There's so many questions, and I cannot wait to see if we get any answers we might get in the next episode. But even if we don't necessarily get all the answers, obviously I'm interested to see what goes down in the next episode regardless. And now moving on to this week's episode of Arrow. Another great episode. This episode, obviously, we have Oliver joining up with Slade in an attempt to find / rescue his son, which is interesting because this episode it's weird because this is the first episode where we really see Oliver and Slade working together again in an almost normal sense. Obviously, like, very similar to season 5 situation, except it's like reverse. We're helping Slade find his son instead of Oliver finding his, with that whole situation. So, well, not just that, but also rescuing everyone else. But it's still a situation of we're getting to see Slade minus the Mirakuru, because this is our first time really getting to see him not as crazy. I think the last time we saw him like this was in season 3. When we saw him kind of locked up and out of his system. But this is him more calm and everything. Still obviously got anger issues, especially when it comes to certain things, especially in this case, his son. But it is weird seeing them work together again. Even like, because that was more of a work environment. This is like, you almost see the like resurgence of them prior to the whole like shadow situation, before the Mirakuru got in Slade's system and he just was crazy, like when him and Oliver were friends, like brothers. And it's just so interesting to see that dynamic like return almost. I mean, the reason why Oliver's doing this is because like Slade went through a lot to help save his friends as well as William. So he's like, why can't I return the favor, So, I mean, to be fair, it's something that Felicity and John talk about too. It's like, well, he did kind of try and leave us behind during the whole Leanne Yu situation last season, but still, he came through in the end, I guess. So, but we ended up learning a lot of interesting things in this episode, because I love what they did with this, because it seems like they're going to be using the flashbacks very sporadically throughout this season. It's not going to be a constant thing, but it's something we'll probably get a look at every once in a while. In this episode, we kind of got to see Slade and his son Joe, but obviously, like present day, he's changed his name to Kane. But we get to see his son, him and his son bond, like they're on a trip and everything. They don't really get to spend much time together because his dad's off at work. Granted, his son doesn't know exactly what he does. It's kind of messed up because I actually talked about this, was it most recently in something else? I think it was like last week in an episode of like The Blacklist or something like that. Maybe the week before last. Nevertheless, it's a situation where basically Slade took his son on a mission. He was meant to do something and his son came along. So we saw a little bonding. Obviously, his son is not an idiot. He knows, like, okay, you're not really a pilot, Dad, because we didn't get any discount or get to come here for free. So it's like, you have to pay for stuff. So it's like, what do you he can obviously tell his dad's lying, but you do see this moment of him obviously very caring about his son. But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe that's not even really him. Maybe that's just him playing, he has to act like a normal dad. Like, oh yeah, well, he's kind of keeping an eye on his target, who's also in the same area. We do see him kill the guy later on, and he hears noises in the bush out there, but he doesn't see anything. I can only assume it's his son. His son ended up finding out that day exactly what his dad did, because at that time he was wearing his mask, but then he took it off partway, like after he had done the deed. And interestingly enough, it also said, because it takes place like 13 years ago, it seems like that particular guy he was interrogating, it seems like that's connected to Lian Yu, because I think the name he was talking about specifically, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, because he had said Purgatory. The person he was looking for in particular, it sounded like, I forgot, I've never remembered Shadow's dad's name. It was the first person Oliver met on the island. But I think that was Shadow's dad's name he was referencing. So I was like, oh, so this is basically leading up to Slade ending up on Lian Yu. Have we ever gotten to see his partner before? I don't remember. It's been so long ago that all happened. Cause that might be, I don't know, because like I said, it depends on what they do with the flashbacks. Like, it might have just been a one-off thing this episode, but maybe that's something we'll see going forward, that basically the flashbacks won't, since they're no longer about Oliver, maybe we'll see flashbacks to other people's past going forward. But nevertheless, it was just kind of a really nice, like I said, aspect of seeing Slade, because we've known him as just kind of like the psychopathic killer, but now we got to see the more human side of him in his episode, because it's like, for him, he didn't even want his son to know that he was involved in this situation, trying to get him back. He didn't want Oliver as a Green Arrow. He wanted Oliver as a diplomat, so that they're like, hey, maybe you can we can solve this without bloodshed, essentially, which is kind of like, that leaps and bounds above anything else. That shows you, okay, Slade's really taking this seriously. Like, if he wanted to, he'd probably go run and gun, but, didn't want to take the chance his son might be hurt, so he wanted to take a more diplomatic approach, because also he didn't want to drag Oliver into this, because it's like, Oliver's already set one foot in that world of what he wants to do. He put up the hood and he passed it on to Diggle, and now he's trying to be a father. So, but it was kind of interesting, because he's like, I'm glad that you get your chance to be a dad again, but not all of us get that chance. And I think in Slade's case, I think he feels like he doesn't deserve one, because the fact of the matter is who he is, and it's like, I'm not a good person, so I don't deserve to have a relationship with my son. It's best to keep a distance. Which Oliver's like, are you doing that for his sake or yours? Which arguably you could say it's both, because it's like, because you can tell Slade doesn't want to see his son look at him the way he feels. He's like, I'm a monster, and the last thing he would want to see is his son look at him in that same way. But Oliver's like, your son will forgive you. Mine forgave me, so kind of saying, Slade isn't too far beyond redemption. And it's something I forgot to talk about earlier. It's super awkward got to be working with Slade, considering the fact of the matter is he did kill your mom. That's along with a lot of people. I mean, to be fair, he worked with Malcolm, and Malcolm was responsible for Tommy dying. So, as well as a lot of people when he did the undertaking and everything. But that's story all on its own. So, interesting enough, the person he meets in this episode, his name Neilhander, played by I think Chris Holden Reed. And he's done a lot of stuff, but I best know him as Dyson from Lost Girl. So that was pretty cool. Seems like he's, surprisingly enough, ended up betraying Slade, because he actually works with the group. Because at first he's told that his son died, but it's like, no, his son didn't die, because he was taken from the prison by this group known as the Jackals. That's because Kane is he's a spy, so they want information. But now at the end of the episode, we end up finding at the end of the episode, after Slade went and kicked some serious ass, one-man wrecking crew, there's certain aspects about him I'm curious, do they apply? Like, I think certain aspects, like regeneration and stuff, to a certain extent. Like, I think in the comic books, I remember hearing like that. More shout outs to Screw Attack and Death Battle, just because I've been watching a lot of Death Battles lately. But I ended up finding out he has like a regenerating factor, which I don't know if he still has that. Like I said, this show is very grounded, so a lot of stuff is probably being kept to he's just a really good fighter, and he has super good armor. We'll probably leave it at that. So they're probably not really tapping into some heavy regeneration ability, which kind of plays a role in something which I'll get to in a second. Now that I'm thinking about that, it's just kind of interesting. But nevertheless, to be fair, it's not like that'd be too much of a stretch, considering this show is still kind of dealing with metahumans and stuff like that, because Dinah's a thing. But and they stepped in the realm of supernatural before. But like I said, the show's meant to be I've talked about more recently in a video too. The aspect is the show's more grounded. So nevertheless, I'm losing focus here. He kicked some serious ass, gun, sword, blazing, just badass. To be fair, he was outnumbered, because he didn't want Oliver involved, drugged Oliver and left him to say, hey, thanks for your help, for reminding me that I am a dad. and go home to your kid and, be a father. So, but lo and behold, it turns out that this whole Jekyll situation is a front. His son is actually the leader of this group. So they didn't kidnap him. They were breaking him out of jail. I guess he kind of fell into the same line of work as Slade is. I guess he's kind of like a mercenary at this point in time, which is like last thing you can tell, Slade didn't want his son to be that. But I'm sure maybe that's something we'll kind of get to see in the future. Maybe it's something that Joe eventually revealed to Slade, or maybe it's something that Slade never knew that his son knew. Maybe like the next episode will cut to his son be like, yeah, I was there that day. I saw what you did to that guy. So, and I just never said anything. Also, have they ever mentioned who his wife, Joe's mom is? Because he references her in this episode, but I don't remember them ever talking. Like, I don't know who his wife is. I've not looked it up. I'm sure if it's a thing I can look up, probably like, oh, comic book wise, who is his wife? And more likely, it'll probably end up being that in this case. Also, then who was the kid that was in 2049 and Legends of Tomorrow that was kind of wearing a similar thing to Slade? I wonder who is that supposed to be? Huh. Nevertheless. So you do have Oliver, he went there to back Slade up, but now he sees this reveal, so it's like, I don't know what's going to go down in that regard, because it's like, because we might be dealing with a situation where it's like, Kane holds a grudge against his dad for not being there. I mean, a lot of people in this situation, in this show, kind of have dad issues. Felicity has dad issues for her respective reasons. Oliver has some to a certain extent. I mean, he was never able to really deal with he dealt with his dad's issues because they took on the form of the undertaking and this whole venture that happened. But it's also just like, he never was able to really confront his dad about all the bad things that he did, even though he thought they were the right things at the time. Bad things for the ultimate right, the ultimate good, whatever the case may be. Slade did say, like, I would join the Jekylls if it meant you letting my son go. So I'm wondering, is that going to be a situation of him trying to recruit his dad into it? Or is he just going to be like, I'm curious to see what goes down and what will Oliver do, like, since he's staying there. Because this also means he is breaking his promise to William, because he told him he was leaving his life behind, but now he's not. So a lot on Oliver's plate in this particular situation. Do he break his promise to his son? Do he keep his promise to Slade? I'm sure he's going to try and do both. So I'm interested to see what the outcome of this will be and what it means for Oliver going forward. Will this kind of trickle to him going back into action? We'll just have to wait and see. Now, the other side of this episode dealt with the return of Vigilante. But not only his return, it turns out we actually get his identity revealed in this episode. And it's Vincent, Dinah's ex-partner / significant other, boyfriend, who she thought died like around the time the particle accelerator went off. So at the end, we end up finding out that he is a metahuman. In fact, he heals from stuff, which is why that's why I was like, we'll get to that in a second. So it's like, cause that kind of plays into the whole aspect of like, Slade's supposed to be like that. And he has an injured eye too, kind of like, so I was like, is that supposed to mean something? I don't know. I just thought it was kind of similar. I mean, cause they like, I ended up looking it up. Like, I think, was that last season I ended up looking it up. Vigilante is from the comic books too. I didn't read too much into it. I just saw like a comic book version of it. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's not like a Arrow specific character. I don't know. I'm just curious to see if there was anything from that, or whether that's just kind of I don't know, it's a thing. It explains something too, because the last time we saw Vigilante, I think it was the last time we saw, was when Adrian threw him off a building. But then, like, instead of him dying, Adrian looked and he was gone. So I was like, oh, I guess he survived that. Maybe it's his arm or something. It's like, no, it turns out it's because the dark matter didn't just give Dinah powers. It gave him something else too. So he has like some regeneration ability. I mean, maybe it goes beyond that. But for now, he's like, yeah, stuff that should hurt me, like, it regenerates. So this hits Dinah pretty hard, because it's like, oh, here he's off going crazy, hurting and shooting and killing a lot of people. And it's like, for her, it's like she went over the edge trying to seek revenge for him. It's like she became something else entirely, because she was trying to get revenge for him. And it's like, he's been alive this entire time, which it hits her, and she doesn't know how to feel about it. First, she's like, well, he's Vigilante. There's no way this is the man that I once loved and knew, so I'm going to put him down. But, you have Diggle talking to her like, no, there might still be some part of him still in there, that you don't have to do this. Because the fact of the matter is, you're more so mad at him because a combination of just like who you became in his name, and now you're kind of throwing that against him. But it's like, maybe we can do something. Maybe we don't have to like kill him. Maybe we can just find a different way, essentially. So, because Diggle, I'm sure, isn't doing this just for Vigilante's sake and because it's the right thing to do, but he's also doing it for Dinah's sake, because it's a situation of, if she did do this, would she be able to live with herself afterwards? Like, she'd hate herself. She'd hold herself in contempt. She'd have contentment for herself because of what she had done, especially if it's someone that you love. That's not an easy thing to come back from. So we do find out why he's doing all this, and it's kind of a similar, it kind of coincides with basically the current environment in Star City, in the whole aspect of like, are vigilantes necessary or not? It's like, well, cops are here, but it's like the cops are underfunded. They don't get the job done. So vigilantes are here to back them up. Once again, it also turns into that conversation of, what's the difference between Green Arrow and the Flash? You're both heroes, but one's a superhero and one's just a vigilante, And I just always think that's such an interesting distinction. I mean, that's something we still also got to remember going forward. Like, it is up to a vote. The city will ultimately decide where that whole bill falls, on whether it should be, the city should be anti-vigilante or for or pro-vigilante, so, but, because for him, it's like, we didn't do a lot as cops. Even when we tried our best, what did it amount to? Nothing. Kind of similar to this week's episode of Supernatural, actually. Like, did all the good we do really matter in the end? So that's why he's taking up this crusade. It's because I was wondering, I was like, because that was the question too. It's like, why are you attacking that Congress lady? Because, like, councilwoman, not Congress, like councilwoman, because it's like, all that's going to do is hurt your position. But for him, he doesn't care about all that. He's just about getting the job done. Also, he turns out, he's like, oh yeah, she's a dirty councilwoman. So it's like, so what has she done exactly that's so dirty? Like, obviously she's not, like, saying that she's not a good person, that maybe this whole anti-vigilante bill is just because she needs vigilantes taken care of, so no one realizes what she's really up to. But I don't know. I'm curious to see where that all goes. I mean, we do see Dinah let him go in the end, just because there is still a part of her that cares about him. But she does see that there is some part of Vince still in there, because when she gets the box back, she gets a little box thing that he made, like a little paper flower in. And that was something she had talked about to Diggle before, about like, that's something he used to do before he went all crazy in his making all these bullets and stuff like this. So it's, there is still part of Vince in there. So, because for him, it's like, the reason why he didn't tell Dinah that he was alive, because it's like, well, it would have interfered. And basically, he's got to turn himself almost into a weapon to get the job done. That was kind of a thing with him and Oliver last season, because it's like, you're not getting the job done. You're not willing. This is war, and you're not willing to cross that line to do whatever is necessary. But it's like, it's that hard stance when it comes to vigilantes too, because there's always the good vigilantes, but there's also those people who go too far. And it's like, for some people, it's like, well, the reason I'm going too far is because it's the only way to make a difference. But at the same time, all you're doing is hurting your cause. But for him, like I said, it's all about, like, it doesn't matter whether people support me or for me or hate me. As long as I get the job done, that's all that matters. So, I mean, like I said, it also goes from a different perspective too, because he was a cop at one point in time, and he's tired of things not working out. Just, it's not like he went 100% crazy. There is not like I agree with it, but there is some logic to why he's doing it, just because he feels like he has to. It's the only way in his mind, he can make a difference. So it makes you wonder where he has been in these, like Dinah said, the 4 years. Like, Vigilante only popped up last season. So I guess kind of filling that void of, like, Oliver was the only one kind of working at it between season 4 and 5. So before the team came back together again, also got the new recruits and everything. So, but another big part of this episode is we still have Agent Watson being a thorn in everybody's side. But it's not just about taking down Oliver. As we saw before, she has her little board connecting all the different people in Oliver's lives, and it's like, she's bringing them in. She brought in Diggle, she brought in Felicity. We never got to see it, but they talked about it. But she also brought in Renee, so she's closing in. We also love the fact that Curtis is like, why didn't she bring me in? Like, it's probably because she doesn't think, like, you're a tech dude, so she's probably not too worried about it. or eventually she's going to get to him at some point in time. I mean, for all we know, this might play a role in his ex Paul, because his ex Paul knows that he works with the Green Arrow. So this might be a situation, or the reason why she hasn't contacted Curtis is because she's working through the people outside. Maybe this might end with her going to Felicity's mom or stuff like that. So maybe she might go to Paul, and maybe Paul's going to be worried about lying or something, you know. Maybe it's like, oh, Paul, she goes to Paul, and it's like, if Curtis comes forward, we can lessen the sentence if he testifies or admits to, you know, who's the Green Arrow, that really it's Oliver. Now she's also got her eyes set on Dinah, because Dinah disappeared during the attack on a councilwoman later in the episode, and lo and behold, who shows up? The new Black Canary. So lady is no dummy. She's got things kind of figured out. So she's just not acting on anything because she doesn't have any proof. So I'm very interested to see what they do with her in the story, especially because I feel like she's going to be diving deep into other people's backgrounds, especially Diggle's. But then there's the whole Lila situation, who works for Argus, which is like a super secret government organization, which, if you're watching Legends of Tomorrow, like, you know, some things happen with Argus in that too, which I'm like curious, like how we go from here to there, you know? So that's always a question with that. That's always a weird thing about like the whole time travel thing, because you're like, how did you get there? What will lead up to that point? You know, this and stuff, because you've always got this stuff going up in the future because of the whole time travel aspect. Nevertheless, I guess I'm just curious about that. Like, will that come up? Because she's asking Diggle about, I was like, oh, I didn't see that in all your stuff. And Diggle's like, oh, you didn't? You're looking in my you're looking into my files and stuff like that. Because it's like, oh, Diggle, like, oh, you know, John, why are you here at a police investigation? It's like, God, lady, it's like, ooh. And like, because she knows the truth, she just can't quite get it or prove it yet. There's, like I said, there's also that aspect of, we still haven't cut back to, it's a person who made that picture about Oliver, who who basically photoshopped his head to be like, oh, he's the Green Arrow. But it's like, that was for a particular reason. So I'm still thinking that might have something to do with Caden, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Like, that might all play into his thing, because Helix, you know, in particular, Helena knew that Oliver was a Green Arrow. She kind of figured out everyone's identity from the team, so she would know. So obviously, Caden, being smart, would know too. Not unless, like, once that all got figured out, you know, like, he has to know who they really are. Besides, like, he has Laurel on their side too, so she definitely knows their identity. So that's definitely a potential thing, and that might play a role in this whole situation. I mean, Oliver's back down from being a Green Arrow, so that might be a little harder, but maybe that's also the point. Maybe it was to put Oliver in a position that he would eventually kind of have to back down from the Green Arrow. I just thought about something too. It's actually kind of spoilers now that I think about it. I didn't even give it too much thought, just because it's like, it's a couple weeks out. It's like, what? 3? A little more than 2 weeks away from something that kind of, like, I won't talk about it, but if you were like, oh, 2 weeks from now, what's that? If you figure it out, you're like, oh yeah, like, certain previews have been like, oh, that spoils that, but, and nevertheless, like I said, even till now, I just didn't even think about that. But you can already tell that it's leading into, I'll leave it at that, because I'm not trying to spoil or ruin anything, just in case you've managed to avoid the previews and stuff like that, so I won't talk about it. So, like I said, a great episode. I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode with all this going on. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.